Hello, everybody. Thank you for joining us and welcome to our online kitchen talk tonight. We already had a chance to say hello to some of you. Now I want to welcome those of you who are joining us in our live stream on Facebook. Those of you who know us for longer know that n-ost kitchen talks usually happen during our media conferences. It's the moment when local journalists invite their colleagues from different countries to their kitchens, and then over a couple of beers, they have a nice evening together, and this is a great opportunity for informal exchange. This year, we had to cancel our n-ost media conference, unfortunately, due to the corona crisis. Initially, it was planned to happen in October in Vienna. We hope that this will be possible next year, maybe even in spring. And this is the moment when the idea came up to transform the kitchen talk into an online format. So a kitchen talk is not only 1 hour of an interesting public discussion that you're following right now, but you can also pre-register for the Zoom meeting, and then you can participate in the non-public part before and after the live stream. But if you joined us this time only via the live stream, you can also participate and send us your questions and comments. Just use the comment function below the stream, and we will pick up your questions and comments and try to react on them. And last remark, this public discussion is being recorded, just for your information. Now I want to give the floor to our host today. Anna, thank you very much for inviting us to your kitchen, and now it's your turn. Anna, maybe you can present yourself and then take over.
Yes. Hello, everybody. Can you hear me well? Thank you very much. I'm very excited because it's my first time I moderate something, and from this place and also from this kitchen. So thank you very much for being with us today. And also thank you, n-ost, for organizing all these cool informal meetings to get to know journalists from different countries. Today, we have the chance of meeting 2 very experienced foreign affairs correspondents, Hediye Levent from Turkey and Michael Thumann from Germany. They will help us to know a little bit better how is covering from the front line now in times of Corona. If this thing was already quite tricky before, now we will see that it's even more. So let me introduce you them. Hediye is a Turkish freelance journalist currently based in Damascus. She's covering the Syrian civil war for media like the Deutsche Welle. Merhaba. Also, we have Michael. Hello, Michael, from Germany. He's a foreign affairs correspondent of the German newspaper ZEIT, also former correspondent in Moscow, Istanbul, and Cairo. And he's still traveling in the conflict zones of Eastern Europe and the Middle East. So, as you all know, because you read the description before in the invitation, we are covering now, we are talking today about how the pandemic is affecting their work. So I think we can start by asking you, both of you, how is to be a journalist, a war correspondent in times of the coronavirus? You can, Hediye, you can start if you like, that you are far away from us. The micro, yeah.
Actually, Corona epidemic didn't affect me too much because being a journalist in Middle East countries is very difficult. I mean, for example, before the Corona, we had to get permission from the legitimate government or local authorities, or even some armed groups which control some places to travel somewhere else, just like the Corona days. So we always need permission to go somewhere else, to other cities, to other places. And so in Corona days also, before the Corona also, getting information, confirmation of the information, or finding a local source, which is as objective as much as possible under the conflict circumstances. is very difficult for us. So in Corona days, yes, we are locked down at home, just like the rest of the world, and I cannot go to the street, and I have very limited interaction with the ordinary people in the streets, which are my main sources for the reports. I have to make my interviews by phone or phone calls or Skype. Of course, I mean, such things affect me too much, but in the end, before the corona or after the corona, the situation for the foreigners, for the media or for the journalists in Middle Eastern countries didn't change too much. And also, there's another point maybe we should mention. Conflict zones are very suitable places for pandemic, any kind of pandemic risks. And especially the clashes in the war zones. And generally, we try to be careful as much as possible, but it is impossible to protect ourselves 100% because we breathe the gunpowder in the air, and we cannot protect ourselves from the viruses from the water, in the water. So pandemic, we used to live with under the pandemic risk in those regions. So I think Corona didn't change our life too much. Just it made everything a little bit harder.
We will talk into details, but thank you for your thoughts. And what about you, Michael? How is it affecting you in a global sense?
Well, you know, I feel very much socially distanced from the areas where I report from usually, and it's so being a frontline journalist. You asked, my frontline is my computer screen. That is the new reality of the Corona age, because obviously, and Hediye highlighted that you actually have no access to the front line these days. Many countries and countries I had traveled to before, they closed the borders, or if you fly in, if you get a flight at all, you have to live in confinement in quarantine for 14 days or longer. But in many cases, you cannot even get there. So it simply doesn't make sense to try to get into to eastern Ukraine and the Donbass area, or to Chechnya, or that's why you have to look for other sources. And I think we'll get to that. The front line is web research, it's Skype, it's WhatsApp conversations. And so this has changed journalism in some ways, and maybe also there will be something, some of these accesses are there to stay, I suppose. It might also change journalism in interesting ways.
Thank you very much. We already mentioned before, and you briefly said it now, that it's already quite tricky to be covering and be working in those areas. What do you think, both of you, that has been highlighted with the pandemic? Which problems or which obstacles they existed before already, and now they are even bigger? Maybe Michael, you can start now, and then.
Yeah, with pleasure. Well, I think that the restricted access we are having this is of course something revolutionary. It turns everything upside down what we've known before, but honestly, restricted access was something which we all struggled before as reporters in the area, and if we try to go somewhere. So and this is it goes without saying that Corona basically has strengthened, has reinforced, has highlighted problems which were there before. It's the perfect excuse for states and bureaucracies. But just to give you two or three examples, like if you wanted to get to the Donbas area in eastern Ukraine, the area controlled by the Russian-supported separatists, they made a selection of journalists anyway they wanted to let in. And if they didn't want you, or if they didn't like what you wrote, so they simply wouldn't let you in. Also countries like Russia or Turkey, they have been working for quite some time with a special permit system for areas where tension occurs. You need a special permit in Russia even if you're an accredited correspondent to go to Chechnya, for example, and to work with the local authorities there. And Turkey has a very shrewd system also to limit access of foreign journalists to go to the border to Syria, to speak to people in the Kurdish areas in the southeast. In general, you do not need an accreditation, and there is no law for that. But it is a kind of informal procedure today that they ask you for this. Police would ask you for that if they stop you in the areas. But it's very difficult to get such an accreditation. And if you ask for that in the information offices in Ankara, they would simply give you either no answer, or they would put you off and delay your request. So those were all these restrictions, which led eventually to the fact that if you travel to these countries, semi-authoritarian hybrid system countries, that actually journalists who should get the information for people, for example, who travel there, for tourists who travel to that country, that as a tourist, you enjoy much more freedom than a journalist. And and this is a tendency which is on since quite some time. And Corona now is the wonderful opportunity to really clamp down on things they wanted to clamp down anyway.
Thank you, Michael. And you, Hediye, do you also share this view? Are you confronting the same obstacles than him?
Yes, I agree with Michael. And in Corona times, I think, how can I explain? I mean, pandemic or Corona caused a kind of illusion about the region. And we forgot every aspect of the wars or clashes in the region. We are not talking about the demonstrations in Iraq, or we are not talking about the results of the war in Syria. We are not talking about Yemen. We are not talking about Lebanon. We are just talking about one topic and one aspect, Corona. How does it affect those countries? How many hospitals they have, and etc. But in the end, in the streets, people are talking about their real problems. And for example, yesterday I went to a supermarket, and I had a chat with a guy which is working at supermarket. He didn't have a mask, and I asked him, "Isn't it dangerous for you? I mean, working without mask at a supermarket, because he is in contact with a lot of people all day." And he told me he's not comfortable with the mask, but because of the hot weather, and he doesn't want to use the mask. But I told him, "Isn't it good for you to stay at home or not working?" And he told me, "I prefer to die because of Corona instead of being unemployment." So this is the real problems: economic, financial crisis, or daily life, or finding a job and having regular income every month. Those are the real subjects or real problems of the region. And the second point, we are okay on the ground, such as Syria or some countries or Iraq. The clashes are decreased since the beginning of Corona epidemic, but pandemic. but it doesn't mean they stopped. And in coming weeks, maybe we witness more harsh, more violent clashes in the region, including Syria. So maybe we should begin to talk about different aspects of pandemic effects in those regions. This is very important. And on the other hand, we forgot to talk about ISIS, for example, or radicalism or jihadism. Those are the main topics or main subjects which are affecting the people's life directly in the region.
Do you think, let me ask you one question concerning to that. Why do you think that the population of the armed conflicts of these countries, these regions that are dealing with conflicts, do you think why they are especially vulnerable? Because we all, of course, talk about many different people from different countries, Europe, but why the populations of these countries are specifically at risk?
At first, because of the war affects everything. I mean, the air, the water, everything we eat, you know, I mean, after a long bloody war, you can't protect your body or yourself from the results of the war, which affect everything you eat, you breathe, everything. You know? I mean, so those people are living under those circumstances for a long time, and they are not healthy, and they cannot eat well, they cannot buy milk or eggs, and they cannot feed themselves or their children well for a long time, and they cannot they don't have enough opportunities to find high quality medication or hospitals, and their life standards are very low, so they are very vulnerable about in the days of corona.
May I add a thought there? I think there's one major reason in addition to what Hediye said why they are so vulnerable, and that's transparency. It's the countries in general where the population is very vulnerable in the pandemic. Countries which are not open about the causes, which are not open about the consequences of the coronavirus pandemic. And just to give you an example, there are countries which are actually not adhering to the WHO rules in registering corona fallacies, in registering those who have fallen ill with the disease. And that is a huge problem, especially in crisis areas, because people simply do not know what's going on. Then also, of course, you have health systems in crisis. That is what usually happens in crisis zones. So there's very little access to treatment, and so this all makes people very specifically vulnerable.
And you wanted to add something? Yeah, please.
And also, we are talking about millions of people. Most of them don't have a home. And we are talking about hundreds, thousands of people which are living in tents or in the streets. And we are talking about thousands of children which are raising under those bad situations. So the situation in the region is very bad.
I find something a bit contradictory, the thing that you both have tons of stories that you would like to cover, especially now, and I assume that the political agenda is giving a lot of priority to specifically to the pandemic, but not maybe to the effects of the pandemic in those regions. How are you both dealing with that, and how are you getting publish? How are you getting your articles published? Because for you, Hediye, you are a freelance correspondent. I guess it would be more difficult than for Michael, that works directly for a newspaper. But let us know how you do it in order to publish your stories.
It's about, and here you're talking about the inner, the other front line, I'd say, the inner front line in the editorial board to get you, to push your story through. And there's one general problem for all foreign reporters these days, which is that the coronavirus crisis focuses or leads us all to focus on our own countries. So we haven't just closed borders, we have also to a certain extent closed our minds to what's going on in other countries, because we are all concerned in the first place. And so the here and me, myself, is the first thing I think about. So this is a general tendency in this crisis, which I think is very bad for foreign reporting. But there's hope, I tell you, there's hope. Because I recently realized that when we talked on our weekly planning conference for the next week, ZEIT is a weekly, and we then had all these tons of corona proposals. We can do this and that and look from this and that angle. And all of a sudden there was such a fatigue in the virtual conference room, and that people sometimes they can't hear it anymore. And I think this is where we as foreign reporters and correspondents have to be vigilant and go in. So it's basically it's a wait and pitch approach. When you see that the focus on your country is somehow letting everybody think we need something new, we need a new angle, and that is the moment. And classically, I'd say, generally it is the feature story, if it's possible to write one, but the feature story is the strength of foreign reporting, and that is generally an advantage, because if you write from foreign countries, very often it's possible to get more stunning stories, to get more stunning characters you describe. And so I think that is the chance. And as the crisis goes on, we will see more of this corona fatigue, having reported about our own neighborhood.
Hediye?
I can't hear you.
Do you want to add something? Can you hear me?
Can you repeat the question?
Yes, I wanted to know how are you dealing, because you are a freelance correspondent, how are you dealing to publish your stories? Because maybe before you had more space for that, but now you encounter the problem that the media tells you we are not interested, or let's make it more specific about coronavirus or something like that.
Actually, Anna, Corona affected the developments on the ground too. I mean, for example, in Syria, there are two places which
Something's wrong?
do you hear me?
Yes.
Yeah, we can hear you.
Okay. In Syria, there are two places which there are clashes. One place is Idlib, and the second place is a small place on the Syrian and Iraqi border. But since the beginning of the pandemic, corona pandemic, the clashes decreased also. So because everyone on the ground focused on internal issues connected, I mean, dependent on corona. So, such as Turkey, Russia, United States, even the armed groups in Egypt or in some places in Syria. So my local sources also don't have too much information about the situation on the ground, because they don't take enough, I mean, they can't update their information also, because everything stopped on the ground, but it doesn't mean the clashes ended, or there will be peaceful days in those areas. And the second point, because of that, I can't prepare or write too much articles about the politics or the last political developments in the region and or financial crisis. But on the other hand, also all the media outlets, including the media which I'm working for, are still focused on Corona and effects of Corona to the Syrian people or to the conflict zones. And unfortunately, I can write just a few articles about that, because it's a very limited subject in these days. As Michael told, in Middle East countries, it is very, very difficult to get real or true information. And when we are writing some articles, we can't be sure about the numbers of that people or how many hospitals they have or capacity of the health services. So we have many difficulties about that. But also there's another point. I think Corona is becoming a kind of excuse for the local authorities to make the unrest voices silent. I mean, especially in Iraq or in Syria or in Lebanon, we see the same stories. In last 2 or 3 weeks, if anyone says anything about financial situation in the country or the political situation in the country, they try to silence those voices, and they say, what are you doing? Why are you asking such questions? We are fighting against Corona in these days. Is it the right time to ask that question? And something like that. So I think Corona is a kind of, I mean, it's a kind of excuse for more authorities in the region.
And also, Michael, do you agree that the governments are taking advantage of this silence?
Oh, certainly they do. I mean, they as we mentioned already, they would work with these restrictions. They would use the opportunity to restrict access any further. What they also do, and that is, I think, it is the manipulation of information. There are countries which try to manipulate statistics, and I mentioned Corona statistics are a matter of serious manipulation, because there's a kind of competition, interstate competition going on, who has the smallest numbers of people dying from Corona. So this is why this is being forged. So also information being given out in very small doses. And there is one thing which is particularly true for Russia, that it is very hard to get information from government officials apart from the given statements, the official statements, but it's very hard to ask bureaucrats and to get in touch with bureaucrats to verify information. They basically let you starve on that. And so that is one way of restricting access also.
And do you think that those political effects will also have, that they could last longer in those countries after the pandemic?
Oh, certainly. I mean, it's something that politicians and bureaucrats get easily used to. because it's a very comfortable situation, and it's also, I think, they take advantage of the fact that they know we are attached now to screens. It's much more difficult to move around, and we have to rely on other people's information. We have to rely on people who see things. If we talk about front lines, you know, who see things at the front line. They know journalists have to connect with these sources. So that is a way of manipulating, you know, and there are possibilities, because if you can't be there by yourself, you know. There's another thing which they cannot influence that much, but it is a sad fact that if you are not, you can speak, as we, and I mentioned it earlier, that WhatsApp and Skype have become the instruments of choice in order to get in touch with people. But this has a backside, which is you can't smell. You can't look around, you know, you see the screen, you see me now here with the very limited background I have, you know, but you can't see what's going on left and right. And for a reporter, this is very, very important, you know, the central impressions, the overtones, so it's like, I don't know, it's like playing piano with plastic gloves, you know, this kind of getting information.
Yes, thank you. I have some questions to ask you, but I see that we already have some questions with the audience. So I will start by asking you something, and then if any of you wants to know something, don't be shy. So first of all, we have a question of that coming from Paulina, that is interested in knowing if it's going to you, Hediye, in knowing if there are less foreign correspondents in Syria now due to the corona. And now I also add if this, for example, is a benefit for you, because you can become like one of the few correspondents that are on the spot.
Actually, I am the only journalist, Western journalist in Damascus now. There are Russians and Chinese, and it is not a benefit because I am under the spotlight, and that makes, I mean, working as a journalist in Damascus more and more harder for me. I mean, I hope I see more foreign journalists in Damascus very soon. Yeah, because it's very difficult to work in Damascus as a Western journalist.
Okay.
This is, by the way, true also for other countries. Like in Ukraine, there have been a limited number of journalists anyway, but it's also true for Russia, where some people, because of the harsh lockdown measures, some correspondents have left their correspondent posts and report now from Germany or from England, from wherever, about the area of their reporting, and basically do it the same way as somebody like me who is based in Berlin. So these are, I think that is temporary, I suppose, but we'll see when they let people back in and how long the confinement will be then, you know, at home.
We have also one question from Hannah that wrote on Facebook. Hello, Hannah. For both of you, first to Hediye, she wants to know how about the coverage of local media in Syria. She wants to know if the corona is playing the greatest role in the local media, and how are all the other serious topics covered? And also for you, Michael, afterwards, and how is the situation in Ukraine, in Eastern Ukraine?
Actually, the local media is working under the same rules, just like me. and they can't travel to the other cities. They can't get true information from the government officials, and I mean, yeah, they are mostly writing about corona and corona effects and about corona, but also in Syria, especially the places, cities which are under control of Syrian army or Damascus, the most important topic is the financial crisis, and the second topic is Idlib. So yes, they are writing about corona, but also they are writing about the financial crisis and Idlib also, and also the international conflicts, political conflicts, especially between Russia, Turkey, and United States, and yeah.
Yeah, maybe I add something about Ukraine there. So in general, if we talk about the separatist Russian control areas in the Donbass, you would have an overwhelming media coverage there by the media market is controlled by Russia. So they would read Russian newspapers. They would first and foremost watch Russian TV. Local media are mostly web-based, and there's not that much. But as far as all of Ukraine is concerned, it is, I think, the same picture as in so many countries, that of course the corona crisis is overwhelming reporting, and it is the #1 topic. Ukraine has never been a country with a very broad selection of foreign reporting from here and there. So this is why, and they do not have, like usually Ukrainian newspapers and online platforms, and of course TV stations. They would have correspondents definitely in Moscow. They would have definitely in Washington, and then in Europe they always tend to choose between Berlin or Brussels, whatever seems more important to them at this point in time. So and that is why generally foreign reporting is not the strong point of Ukrainian media, but they would cover at the moment the classical topics, of course, the challenge in the East, the social problems, very much so, the social problems, and of course the lockdown.
And actually, in the Middle East, there is no free media. I mean, in Iraq, in Syria, even in Lebanon, there's no free media. So if we are talking, when we are talking about local media, we should always think about the political side, which supporting these media outlets. So, as a journalist, which is working, who is working in the Middle East more than 10 years, I think the posts at Facebook or Twitter are more reliable than any article at local media. So this is very difficult to find the real reasons of any conflict or real situation in the country by reading the local media or watching local media.
You don't want to add anything? I wanted to ask you, because it's interesting, you're mentioning about the fact that communications are a bit tricky also in order to get connections, sometimes Wi-Fi. Also, for example, for you, Hediye, maybe people don't know, but there was a problem for you to connect with Zoom because of there was Zoom, but also WhatsApp because of the restrictions, the sanctions to Syria. Yeah. This makes me wonder, how do you do to get access to sources that you mentioned before, that the most important people for you, the most interesting are the normal people that you find on the street. how can you get access to those people if the communications are not so easy?
Unfortunately, in the Corona days, this is the most terrible thing for me. I have a very limited interaction with the people in the streets, and unfortunately, in Syria or in most of the countries in the region, we have to. These people in the streets are our main sources for our reports. We have to be in contact with the people in the streets, especially, or in other cities, to understand the situation, real problems, or what will happen in the future, or the political tension, or the situation in general in the country. In these days, I'm trying to contact with my sources by phone, by Skype, by WhatsApp, but it is not enough, actually. But I have a lot of troubles about updating some programs at my computer, or connecting to some programs just like Zoom and some websites. They are not blocked by the Syrian government. They are blocked by the host services. You cannot have, or you cannot open a Twitter account in Syria, or you cannot access your bank account from Syria. They are all blocked because of the sanctions on Syria. So such things makes our life very, very difficult.
And for you, Michael, how it is the situation in the countries of your expertise?
Well, it's been said several times that in the Corona age, you can have virtual, digital connections of all kinds, but it's very difficult to make new connections because there's this personal link is missing, and that is why I rely obviously on people whom I know. Contacts I have made before, and I would ask them, then could you put me in touch with this or that person, or is there anybody you can recommend me to talk to? And so then I'm basically phoning my way through. That's how I do it, and if possible, I also try then to have a Skype or WhatsApp connection to see the person. There's one other thing which I had discovered previously, but which I'm using now more and more, which is that if there's a fixer or a person you rely on, you let him, before I went there and then I wrote the story. So now I thought, well, why not let him write the story? It wouldn't be the way how we write it in our paper, but then we would have a co-authorship, and that is a way that at least 2 of our 4 eyes have actually seen what's going on, So these are the little tricks how you try to work it through.
Thank you. I see there are no more questions. If anyone wants to say something, don't be shy and write on the chat, but also on Facebook. Someone here wants to say something?
Yes, if there are no more questions, maybe to Hediye. Is it even more difficult for you to work in Syria because you are a woman journalist?
In general, no. But actually, at the beginning of 2018, the clashes decreased a lot. Between 2011 to 2017, yes, I had many difficulties because of my gender, and because at some places there are some groups which are very close to jihadists, ideologies, and it was very difficult for me to contact with them, and I had some difficulties like that. But in general, I didn't have a big problem because of that.
No, because I remember in Ukraine we had this situation where they didn't allow for young men from Russia to go into eastern Ukraine, and this had the opposite effect, that even those who were like critical journalists were not able to go on the spot and observe the situation. This is yeah. Thank you.
Yeah, but I was in Syria before that war. I mean, I came here 2008, and I knew Iraq. I had information about the culture in Iraq, in Syria, and in Lebanon also. So at the beginning of that uprising, I had information about the social structure or culture, or in general. So I was trying to be careful when I was working on the ground, and that was helpful also for me.
We have a question from Andreas from n-ost, who asks, since the topic is ceasefire, do you know of any conflict or situation that actually got better? You know, people, for example, coming together because of a bigger challenge since the pandemic, maybe on a micro level, or this is a naive assumption? Thank you, Andreas. Michael?
Yeah, can I just, you know, as you are asking, I'm trying to go quickly through and process the different conflicts. Let's look at Libya. We actually had we had in was it early April, I think, an announcement of General Haftar that he would now take Tripoli, and that he would go on, and he issued a warning to the internationally recognized government in Tripoli and so on. Nothing came out of that, and he called it off. He then referred to Ramadan, and everybody knows that General Haftar is now not the most pious man in Libya, but anyway, he referred to that as an excuse. I suppose there were other reasons. And so either the UAE has told him to step back and that this wouldn't be a good time, and there we can just guess that also for some troops problems occurred because of the pandemic. We know for sure, for example, that in Moscow, this is not a conflict, but the commemoration of the conflict, the 9th of May celebrations, that these celebrations had to be called off because of the pandemic and because many soldiers got infected during the rehearsals for the celebrations. Also, but Hediye, you better talk on that. In Syria, my impression was that the situation in Idlib eased somewhat. And before you come to that, let me add that, but also as a result of international efforts to promote the ceasefire, which is broken every time and again with the ceasefire in eastern Ukraine, fighting has eased down there somewhat, but it is all very temporary, and I wouldn't come out with a general rule that Corona is promotes peace. I wouldn't go as far as that, but certainly there are little signs that people step back for a moment. Maybe it's the shock for the moment.
Which is the first, I have a curiosity, which is the first place that you would go once the borders are completely open? Like, one story that you have in your mind without telling us too much. But
well, I mean, I would very much like to go to Libya and see what the situation is there like there. But it is very difficult to go anyway, because you even before Corona, you had a very restricted access, and it was very difficult to move around. So, but that is of course the big question, because we had that huge conference in Berlin in mid-January, and there's a concerted effort to defuse the crisis in Libya, and it is a major bone of contention for all the powers and great powers. So, and it is really the big question now: where did this diplomatic effort lead us to, and is it possible at all to restrict General Haftar's ways of inciting more problems, and does the UAE how much weapons go into Libya? That is another very interesting question, because there is an arms embargo, and the EU has finally decided to come up with a new mission to stop shipments and so on. Do they work at all? You know, we don't know, and that I would love to research that.
Hediye?
Actually, when I hear the word ceasefire, I try to understand what are the real reasons behind that attempt. Because in the region, any kind of uprising can turn into a proxy war in a short time. And unfortunately, again, people in the region cannot find a peaceful solution for their future, for themselves. I mean, when we are talking about Lebanon or Syria or Iraq, we are talking about the policies of Russia, Turkey, or United States. So maybe we should, mostly when we are talking about the ceasefire, we are talking about the diplomatic negotiations between those countries which involve the case in any country in the region. So I don't know, I'm not very hopeful about the ceasefires can bring a peaceful future for the region, especially in coming years. Maybe we see more chaotic countries or more chaotic region, because there are very deep financial crises, very deep social crisis, and there were very bloody wars, and there is no public, how can I say, there is no public peace. So I don't know, how can I answer that question?
We have also another question from Sophie Refman. Thank you, Sophie. She's wondering if, on the contrary of what Andreas asked before, if there are places where conflict may evolve or get heavier because of Corona, apart from for example, the worrying situation in the Moria refugee camp. Michael, for example?
I'm thinking.
Okay.
Yeah, there are, it is simply at this point in time, we do not know yet what the repercussions will be in areas where we haven't looked at too closely. I suspect that thinking about Western Africa and thinking about the conflicts emanating from Niger, Mali, and which have also now gone into Burkina Faso, that I heard from people, friends living there, especially in Ouagadougou and in Burkina Faso, that all these countries have closed the borders, so you can't move around anymore for the time being. But that the bandits and local terrorists, that they still move around, and they move around freely. And I can imagine that that these groups will take advantage, especially in order to tip Burkina Faso. That's the big game now in Western Africa. That Mali is a crisis country anyway. Burkina Faso hadn't been so. But they are trickling into the north, and I think that is certainly an area where, as a result of Corona and the fact that also all other countries which were involved look the other way now, that this might increase. As for Ukraine, for example, I'm not so sure that there will be Corona related. I think we will rather go on with this tit for tat process, which is a long drawn out process of breaking ceasefires and concluding ceasefires. I'm very much afraid this will go on for a long time to the detriment of Ukraine, but I can't see that Corona might increase something in the future.
There is a comment just from Nick Muller from the audience, who actually, according to what you were talking about Africa, who says that the Cameroonian Anglophone conflict paused for some weeks, but has resumed quite heavily in the last days. So thank you.
You see things we overlook because foreign reporting is somehow hampered these days. Exactly. I didn't know about that. Thank you for the comment. Yeah.
If someone wants to open up the micro and the camera and ask those questions, or even add the comments live, don't worry. We are here to listen. Any other question? If not, I also have one, but I prefer that you. No, I was thinking in relation to what Sophie wrote about the refugee camp, what is happening now with the people trying to flee those places that they were already fleeing before, like Syria and Eastern Ukraine, some of them going to Poland and some of them moving to other places. Are the flows changing now, or are they stuck in their country, or they keep trying anyway?
I can tell you a bit about this. So that was actually my last trip I did, which was to Turkey and Greece, and the Greek-Turkish border at the Evros-Meriç river, and so this was the major bone of contention between the EU and Turkey before the crisis started, and I could tell you, so as far as the European borders are concerned, there were more refugees coming in the beginning of the year, but actually it was all, this was something which preceded Corona, that the very, very brutal way in Greece, how refugees were thrown back at the border, and not only in the Evros area, but also in the Mediterranean Sea, that these clashes actually deterred refugees from coming. Obviously, of course, those who were camping out there and trying to get into Greece at the river in the north, those refugees, some of them were sent there. One of them were somehow told to go, and there were of course free bus rides. But also this whole ended in a catastrophe there. So that is why basically this was very, very discouraging for refugees, and many, I think, have taken notice. And as far as Turkey and the route through Turkey is concerned from Syria, it is anyway very difficult, and Hediye might add more to that. But I mean, a wall has been built by Turkey, and it's very awfully difficult to get through. And also the whole mood in Turkey has changed. So many people simply do not want refugees anymore in the area, in their cities, and so people have become much more cautious, and it's become much more difficult to move on as a migrant, as a refugee.
Thank you, Michael. Hediye, do you want to say something briefly before finishing? Because I see that we are running out of time. We let you comment on that about the refugees.
I just want to say there will be more refugees in coming years, because most of the people are fleeing because of clashes. But after the clashes, there are a financial crisis, and people are looking for a better life. So they will try to find or catch that opportunity in other countries, especially European countries. So we have to be ready.
Thank you. Well, I think no one wants to say anything else, so I will just say something before Paulina also concludes the meeting, the debate. Thank you very much, both Michael and Hediye, for taking the time to be with us and to share your expertise and your thoughts, and it's always welcome to hear people like you. And for my part, thank you very much. Looking forward to host new events from n-ost. and thank you. Paulina.
Thank you.
Yes, thank you very much, Anna, for your great moderation, and Hediye and Michael also. It was very interesting. Now the public part is over, but we will stay in Zoom among us. And for those who are viewing us on Facebook, please register in advance next time if you would like to stay with us after the public part. We will be back with the next Kitchen Talks in 2 weeks. So please follow our announcements on Facebook. We will announce the topic soon. And please feel free also to send us your feedback and ideas or topic proposals. We are very open and happy to take your ideas on board. So thank you. And now we are going offline.